Following 5 decades of silence, renowned filmmaker Francis Ford Coppola has finally shared the truth about his relationship with Gene Hackman, which fundamentally alters our perception of one of the most potent partnerships in film. Coppola's confession, which he kept hidden for years, reveals why Hackman's performance still haunts us today and why his methods are more important than ever in the wake of The Godfather's historic success in 1972. Coppola's story was not just another Hollywood anecdote. It was a confession that reveals the true genius behind the conversation and a film that changed American cinema forever. When Coppola approached Hackman for the role of Harry Cole, the reclusive surveillance expert Hackman was respected but not yet the household name he would later become. Coppola chose to use his newly discovered influence to create a small, intimate psychological thriller about a surveillance expert haunted by the possible consequences of his work, rather than capitalize on it with another sweeping epic Coppola. Coppola just disclosed that they had a rough first meeting. Hackman arrived with reservations about taking on such a complex introspective character. Gene didn't say much when I first pitched him the role. CA recounted. He just listened, occasionally nodding. Then, after I finished, he simply said, "I understand this man." In that moment, I knew no one else could play Harry Cole. What Coppola has now revealed after decades of silence is the extraordinary lengths to which Hackman went to inhabit the role of Harry Cole. Unlike many actors who socialize between takes, Hackman chose a radically different approach. He isolated himself from the cast and crew, often sitting alone with his saxophone and instrument. He learned to play specifically for the role and refusing casual conversation. Coppola admitted being concerned about Hackman's well-being during filming, but came to understand that this isolation wasn't about being difficult. It was Hackman's method for immersing himself in the character's profound loneliness. There was one day, Coppola recalled, when I found Gene sitting in Harry's apartment set long after we'd finished shooting. The crew had left, but he remained just sitting in the character's space, absorbing the vagueness. "This is where he lives," he responded, looking at me with Harry's eyes instead of Gene's when I asked if everything was all right. It was then that I saw he wasn't merely playing the Harry cult. He had actually become him. The effects of this immersive approach are seen throughout the movie in one of the most impactful scenes. Harry becomes aware that there might be evidence of a premeditated murder on his surveillance tape. Hackman communicates this dawning terror is conveyed by the smallest tremble of his hand and a haunting expression rather than loud speech or overt passion. Coppola now discloses that this sequence wasn't staged. Instead, he merely explained the circumstances to Hackman and rolled the camera, recording an authentic epiphany that made it difficult to distinguish between the character and the actor. This is something that many people don't realize about Gene. Coppola clarified that his biggest strength lay in allowing himself to feel emotion, which is what most performers do. G went through it and let us see it. During the filming of Harry's confession scene in a church, Coppola and Hackman faced difficulties. After multiple failed takes, Coppola adopted a novel strategy. I asked everyone to leave the set except for Gene and the camera operator. I then sat next to him in the confessional and talked about my own failures and guilt. After about 20 minutes, I discreetly left, nodded to the operator, and he filmed what would become the final version. What you see isn't acting. Rather, it's a man facing his innermost thoughts. The conversation's development was hampered by various issues that influenced its ultimate structure. Coppola's disagreements with his first director of photography, Hazel Wexler, resulted in Bill Butler taking over. This shift affected the film's aesthetic, resulting in the aloof viewpoint that is ideal for Harry's character. David Shire's haunting piano score was written before production started in an unusual way. Shire would play the piano on set to help the actors relate to the scene's emotional tone, a tactic that especially helped Hackman stay inside Harry's mental space. Coppola drew a lot of inspiration from Michelangelo Antonio's Blow Up, especially its concept of using technology to solve a crime, but Hermann Hesse's Steen Wolf, which depicts a guy cut off from society, also had an impact on Harry Cole's character. Despite these behind-the-scenes difficulties, or maybe because of them, the talk garnered surprising critical success. I gave Gene both of these works before filming, Coppola explained, not as research but as emotional compass points, and he absorbed them totally. The film received 3 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture, and won the coveted Palme d'Or at the 1974 Film Festival. However, it failed to achieve commercial success, as The Godfather Part 2 was released that same year. Ironically, this relative commercial obscurity has contributed to the film's enduring influence, enabling new generations to discover it time and time again. Many actors who followed after Gene Hackman were affected by his performance in the debate. Al Pacino has publicly discussed his admiration for Hackman's writing, highlighting his capacity to portray nuanced feelings with little outward manifestation. Director Steven Spielberg, who later cast Hackman in The French Connection, has praised his work with Coppola as a masterclass in character development. The legacy of the conversation goes far beyond what Pacino once said. What Gene did was show us all that power doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes the quietest performance is the one that breaks your heart. Films like Enemy of the State, which even had Hackman in a role reminiscent of an older Harry Call, directly acknowledge their debt to Coppola and Hackman's work. Beyond its immediate impact, its exploration of surveillance privacy and moral ambiguity resonates perhaps even more powerfully today than when it was released. The film's 1995 induction into the National Film Registry officially recognized what Siles had long known: that this collaboration had produced something of lasting significance. Cop's recent disclosures regarding their collaboration with Hackman provide fresh insight into their creative collaboration. There were times on that set when, after delivering, I felt more like a witness than a director. Gene taught me something fundamental about directing, and Coppa acknowledged that he demonstrated to me that sometimes my role wasn't to direct at all, but to provide the space where something real could happen. Strong performances in films such as Royal Tenenbaums and The French Connection Unforgiven with the same quiet resolve that defined many of his roles. Hackman withdrew from public life and retired from acting in 2004. The Talk is becoming more widely acknowledged as possibly his most nuanced performance, and his absence from screens has only increased appreciation for the amount of work he left behind. The last sequence of the movie, in which Harry, thinking his flat has been bugged, destroys everything in a meticulous search for surveillance equipment, demonstrates the intensity of Hackman's dedication. What you see isn't just acting. It's a man who has pushed himself to his limits for his art. When he finally sits amid the ruins playing his saxophone, there's a truth there that no amount of direction could create. The scene was filmed over 3 days, with Hackman performing much of the destruction himself. By the third day, Coppola revealed Gene was emotionally and physically exhausted. The themes explored in the conversation have only become more pertinent over time in an era of pervasive surveillance data collection and